times for holidays to Israel and to Paris, but the Salvation Army in their wisdom has sent me to places like Guernsey and Dublin and Blackpool and Shaw in Oldham and Hemsworth in Yorkshire and Wollaston in Northamptonshire and Royston in Yorkshire and Tring in Hertfordshire and now Stanford Le Hope in Essex. It's the nearest I've ever been to home. My home is Croydon, and I'm just 34 miles away now, so that's not so bad. But life is a journey, and many times we relate to life as being a journey. Even the language we use at times conjures up ideas of travelling. We say things like, "I'll cross that bridge when I come to it." My life has no direction at the moment. I don't know which way to turn. I'm at a crossroads in my life. Wherever you go on a journey, what makes it special are the people who accompany you on it, and the same is true about life. What makes life special are the people we meet along the way, the friends we make, and the people who touch our lives. So you can see I'm at an exciting episode in my journey at the moment, because I would guess there's probably about 40 people here this afternoon and I know about 15 of them. So I'm going to get to know you all, and we're all going to go on this journey together, which will be absolutely fantastic. We've read this afternoon from Luke chapter 24. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they walked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognising him. These two friends were sharing a journey together. I don't know if you've ever had to go on holiday by yourself, but if you have, you will know that it can be quite a daunting experience. It can be quite a lonely experience. But these two disciples had each other for company. They were walking 7 miles from Jerusalem to Emmaus. Basically, that's just the other side of Basildon. Walking. Now, I do know one young man that has walked fairly regularly into Basildon and back, but I don't know many nowadays, because we either go in the car or we get the bus. But these two were walking along the road. It would have been a really lonely experience if there'd only been one disciple. You know, our journey as Christians is something special that should be shared with others. As today's disciples of Jesus, we need to share the Christian journey together. And I was so pleased this afternoon to hear John say he's thinking less and less of denominations, because right on there, so am I. Because I think it's important that we worship together, that we share as a community of people together, that we are a community of people committed to sharing life together in the name of Jesus. Instead of being nomads or spiritual tourists, we can become pilgrims who take the journey of faith in the company of others. On Maundy Thursday evening in this hall, we shared a meal and a ceremony of washing of feet. And one of the hymns we listened to said this: "Brother, sister, let me serve you. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I may have the grace to let you be my servant too." We are pilgrims on a journey. We're together on this road. We're here to help each other walk the mile and bear the load. Let us for a moment return to the two disciples on that Emmaus road. The journey on foot was 7 miles from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and as they walked, they had plenty of time to discuss the events of the last few days. Now, they reckon that women can talk, but I think men can talk as well. Get them together over their favourite football team, and it can be quite boring listening to it, especially if you're not into football. These disciples weren't talking about football. They were talking about the events of that first Easter weekend, the Good Friday, when Jesus died on the cross. Easter Saturday, when he was in the tomb. Easter Sunday, when the women went to the tomb and discovered that the tomb was empty and were told that Jesus was alive. You know, I don't know about you, but if that had been me, I think I would have preferred to stay in Jerusalem where all the action was. Not going 7 miles along the road to Emmaus, but staying in Jerusalem where the action was. You could say, I suppose, that they were actually travelling in the wrong direction. You would have thought that ideally they would want to be in Jerusalem with the other disciples. In other words, they were travelling away from the place they should have been. Thinking of this, we could ask the question of ourselves: what road are we travelling on? Are we going in the direction that Jesus would want us to take? The one thing we can see from this account of the two disciples travelling along the road is, even though they may have been going in the wrong direction, who's to know? Jesus still walked alongside them. Even though there may be times when we turn away from Jesus or even abandon him altogether, he'll never ever give up on us. We might not always follow the right path, but Jesus is still with us nonetheless. And so the disciples journeyed together. Today's disciples journey together. The disciples journeyed with Jesus. As the disciples were travelling together, they discussed all that has happened in the last few days and tried to make sense of all that they have seen and heard. They've seen their friend killed in the most horrific fashion, and now, later on, strange reports were circulating that Jesus' tomb was empty and Jesus was alive. It's in all their confusion that Jesus suddenly appears alongside them on the road. But they didn't recognise him. This could have been quite simply that they weren't expecting to see Jesus and therefore weren't looking for him. You know, that happened to me a couple of Thursdays ago at the Gateway People Centre. I'd arranged to meet Betty and have a coffee and talk to her. And just as we were going out, this lady said, "Oh, I thought it was you." I said, "Right, okay. Sorry, I don't know who you are." It's because I didn't expect her to see her where she was. So I said, "Tell me who you are." And she did, and it was John's PA. Actually sitting in the GPC, having a coffee with a young man there as well. I didn't expect to see her in that setup. She didn't expect to see me there, and so we nearly missed each other. Thankfully, she got a better memory than I got and was able to remember who I was. But perhaps that was the problem with the disciples. They weren't expecting to see Jesus. Maybe the reason we fail to recognise God's presence with us is that we're not looking for him, or we're not expecting to find him in those situations we face. That doesn't mean he isn't there, but that we can close our eyes to his presence, that we close our eyes to his voice, and we close our hearts to his love. Another reason why the two disciples may have failed to recognise Jesus was because they were so caught up with their own problems and fears. Sometimes our worries and fears prevent us from seeing Jesus at work in our lives and in the life of his church, because our focus is on other things rather than on Jesus. But even though there may be times in our lives when we don't feel the presence of Jesus, it doesn't mean that he's not there. Just as on a cloudy day, when we cannot see the sun, it doesn't mean that the sun is not there. Look out there today, you can see the sun shining. If you looked out earlier in the week, all you'd have seen was fog, and perhaps you would have wondered where the sun had gone. It doesn't mean that the sun is not there, it's just hidden from our view. So Jesus is always with us, walking alongside us, even if we're unaware of his presence. He doesn't abandon us, even when the path we are following becomes difficult. As Jesus journeyed with those two disciples, he took the time to patiently explain all that had happened. The disciples were interested and listened intently to all that he had to say. Surely, this shows us that we also need to be prepared to listen to Jesus, to what he's saying to us, not just as an individual follower, not just as one particular church, but to us as members of God's family. Within the community of Stanford and the surrounding areas, there are many church buildings. But we need to remember that we belong to the one church, the family of Jesus. We need to take time to listen to each other, and we need to be prepared to work together so that we become part of each other and part of God's family. As the two disciples reach their destination, Jesus acts as if he's going further. But the two disciples invite him to stay and eat with them. That decision to invite Jesus to stay with them was to lead to a life-changing encounter. In their home, Jesus took the bread, blessed it, and proceeded to break it and share it. It was then that the disciples realised, their eyes were opened, and then they recognised that this stranger was in fact Jesus Christ. The amazing thing to note here is that Jesus was recognised in the commonplace routine of everyday life. The breaking of bread was an everyday occurrence, yet it's this ordinary, mundane moment that the fullness of the presence of Jesus is most realised and recognised. Luke chapter 24 verse 31 says, "Then their eyes were opened and they recognised him, but he disappeared from their sight." The two disciples knew without doubt that they had met with Jesus, and we're told that they immediately travelled back to Jerusalem to share the good news there. I think this leaves us with a few questions that we need to answer for ourselves. Firstly, have we met Jesus? Do we see him in the ordinary as well as the extraordinary? And if we have met Jesus, does it make us want to share this good news with others? Not just in the talking, but also in the living out of our lives. And finally, as a Christian community in Stanford, are we working together so that Jesus will be seen in a very real way as we work together in everyday life to fulfil the plans that Jesus has for us as a community, living, working and worshipping together in this area? Brother, sister, let me serve you. Let me be as Christ to you. Pray that I might have the grace to let you be my servant too. We're going to stand and we're going to sing this song through, please.